does it automatically.
I
All
know
right.
it does when I watch the
Thanks.
replay, but I'm talking about on my screen.
Well, hold on. Let's get it cracking because I started broadcasting. Thanks for tuning in once again. Ishmael Sistrunk from the St. Louis American and STLAmerican.com. And we're here today with In the Clinch, our weekly boxing hangout. With me, I got a local fight fan, as he's now listed himself, my co-host, Michael Dixon. Mike, thanks for tuning in. Also, we got a longtime show friend, Mr. Factoid Allen. Factoid, appreciate you joining us this week. I know last week we had some little issues, but glad to have you back. Always respect your opinion. Mike, as you were talking about, if you click on your name, it should open it up. If you got it highlighted, it's just going to show you. But if you click on it again, it should switch with the names. But let's get off to the start. This weekend we had the moment, the boxing pay-per-view, Floyd Mayweather Jr., of course, the biggest name in boxing, versus Marcos Maidana, El Chino. And guys, I got to admit, this was a much better fight than I expected, than I anticipated. Mike, we talked about, how we thought that Floyd would be able to dictate the fight, how he'd seen this style. He'd fought a lot of people with this style, have been very successful. I wrote in my article last week, Maidanos would be easy money, but it turned out to be a great fight. Maidana, he imposed his will on Mayweather a lot, pushed him back against the ropes, unleashed those awkward overhand rights, those jackhammer rights, made a lot more contact than anybody has. When you look at the punch stat numbers, I think they said as long as they've been tracking Mayweather fights, Maidana landed the most punches on Mayweather ever. So it definitely was an interesting fight. Of course, Floyd Mayweather ended up winning a majority decision on the cards. Factoid, let's go to you first. You weren't on with us last week. Did the fight go as you expected, or did you expect Mayweather to have that tough of a time with Maidana, or do you think he did have a tough time? Because there's kind of been a difference of opinion in different camps.
Absolutely, and happy to be back on the show. Always a good time. When we look at this fight coming in, for me, I wasn't necessarily high on, Marcos Maidana really having much of a shot in the fight. I looked at his style, which is extremely awkward, and that, I think, really played a big part in some of the success he had, against Floyd Mayweather. So, no, I didn't necessarily think that Maidana was really going to stand much of a chance. I looked at guys like Robert Guerrero and some of the more recent fighters that you've seen Floyd against and thought that they were at a higher skill level than Marcos Maidana. But what we saw was certainly, a guy who came in from the opening bell, was very aggressive, didn't show Floyd Mayweather any respect at all, was infighting. And the things we've seen and heard from fighters in the past is Floyd Mayweather does such a great job on the inside. He's so tricky. He's using his elbows and forearms. Maidana was up to the task in those regards, kind of those dirty elements of the game as well against Floyd. So he really mixed it up, was letting his hands go a lot. I was impressed at the end of the day as I watched it. I had a nice crowd here. I was really happy to see the turnout for the fight. I had about 15 people, so it was a nice turnout for a Floyd Mayweather fight. But, really, I called it right at the end. I said, it's a draw. I mean, the fight should be a draw. I thought Maidana did a really good job early in the fight. I think he scored a lot of those early rounds because they were close and because he mucked it up and made it ugly and dirty. And made Floyd, I think, uncomfortable at times. Floyd kind of backed himself into the ropes on multiple occasions, and Maidana did some of that, but Mayweather also allowed himself to be backed into those places. So early on, I thought, Maidana was up in the fight, probably till you got to maybe about the 6th round or so, and then I think there was a little bit of a swing, and I saw Mayweather kind of step up, impose himself a little bit more. I thought he was the better fighter the second half. It was still very close, and I thought a draw was fair. Anyone out there screaming controversy, I mean, this is boxing. It was a close fight. Anytime you're talking about close fights, you could make it controversial if you want, but I thought it was a really hard-nosed, close fight. Really enjoyed it, and it was much better than I anticipated.
All right. Well, it's interesting to hear you say you saw a draw. Mike, when I talked to you briefly after the fight, you said you thought Floyd won it easily, or not easily, but comfortably, I'll say. Why do you think that Mayweather deserved to get that decision?
Well, yeah, I never said easily, but I definitely thought that I wouldn't even say comfortably. I thought clearly, though. Your typical boxing close fight. 7-5, 8-4, maybe not 8-4, probably 7-5. I probably would have to say is accurate. I agree with Factoid that heading into the midway point, I definitely think that Maidana was in control. But on the second half of the fight, the next 6 rounds, I thought it was, momentum was clearly on Floyd's side. I thought he had figured out a lot of the things that Maidana was doing, and I thought he was adjusting to the pressure very well. And I thought he, kind of took control and put some rounds in the bag. I think Maidana probably did squeeze a round, maybe an argument for 2 after the 6th round, but I think that overall, I just thought that Floyd was able to win a close, tightly contested boxing match. I thought it was interesting. I thought the suspense level was high because Maidana did something that the other people haven't done, except for maybe Cotto. And even Cotto was doing a little bit of boxing in there, but he wasn't thinking so much. I think Floyd really is at his best when guys try to outthink him. And when they're thinking, they're not always punching. And I think that gives Floyd a chance to kind of take advantage of some of their weaknesses while they're thinking their next move. Floyd is reacting, and I think Maidana just didn't give him that comfortable comfort zone that he likes working in, and I think that's why he was able to do a little bit better than some of the other guys who had always looked great against other people but didn't look good against Floyd, like Robert Guerrero and Canelo. Those were guys that had looked real good in fights leading up to Floyd and then kind of looked kind of confused in there with him. I think Maidana's constant pressure really helped him.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that pressure is key. And I've been screaming, for the last couple of years, the only way somebody's going to give Mayweather problems is to have that constant pressure and to not get discouraged by Mayweather's effective, accurate counterpunching. But we haven't seen people do that. We've seen pressure fighters like you guys mentioned, Canelo, Ghost Guerrero, other guys who we think are going to come forward, but very early in the fight, first, second, third round, Mayweather's counterpunching ability discourages him, and they pretty much stop being aggressive, and that lets Mayweather get into his comfort zone. Marcos Maidana, I think he had success because he never let Mayweather really get comfortable. Mayweather did in the second half of the fight. He was more comfortable. He was more in his style, but even then, Maidana was pushing him back against the ropes. Maidana was throwing, hellacious combos. He was going to the body. He was going to the head. And not every punch landed. If you look at the punch stats, I think Mayweather was at something like, 56% or something. And Maidana was much lower, down in the 20s. Trying to see if I can pull it up here real quick. Yeah, Mayweather was 54%. Maidana was only 26%, but when you look at the total punches thrown, Mayweather 426, Maidana 858. So even though some of those punches may not have been scoring blows, as you say, they may not have hit him right on the chin, may not have got a clean shot on the body, but they still were hitting him. They still were part of that effective aggression that he had. So I do think that the people who say, Maidana deserved to win or should have been a draw, you have to definitely give them credence because Maidana was a guy that pushed the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think, Maidana was, again, his aggressive nature really put him in the best position to have some success in the fight and be able to go into those deeper waters. The one thing that stood out to me in the fight was kind of how the referee called it. It was certainly a really inside fight, and Maidana got away with, I think, a lot of extracurricular type of stuff in the fight. But I was, I guess, happy to see that we didn't see points deducted. But sometimes you like to see a stiffer warning a couple of times. I think there were a lot of shots with that looping overhand right that Maidana throws, where Floyd was getting hit in the back of the head quite a few times. And Floyd did his fair share complaining to the referee, but nothing was done, and he kind of kept his official calls it one way in the first quarter. You want him to call it the same way in the fourth quarter. And I think at least the referee in this fight did a good job of maintaining his balance and keeping it, calling it the same throughout the entire fight, because both guys really did an inside job on each other at certain points. Floyd was using his elbows and forearms on Maidana, and Maidana landed some good shots below the belt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard a lot of people, Mayweather fans who criticize Maidana, he's too rough, he's, doing all this fouling. But you're right, Mayweather, he did his share of fouling as well, so it did seem like that it was called equally to to both two. But yeah, Maidana, I mean, I think at one point he tried, I don't know if he connected, but he tried to knee Mayweather in the head, but he did hit him with some low blows. Mayweather, you know, he did a lot of holding. At one point he was holding on to the rope as Tony Weeks is trying to separate him. You know, he's holding on to the ropes. He put him in the headlock a couple times. He raked him, you know, with the lace side of the gloves a couple of times. So I think Tony Weeks could have called it more strictly, but there was room for both guys, for him to punish both guys. The one thing I do think that worked in Mayweather's favor, and this isn't something that was purposefully, but just Tony Weeks' style of refereeing, is that he did allow a lot more, or he was quick to break him in the clinch. When we look back at Sean Porter, his last fight against Paulie Malignaggi, he was really successful a lot because he worked in the clinch. Paulie would hold him, but he would get one hand free and work, and the referee allowed that. In this fight, whenever Mayweather tied up Maidana, Tony Weeks stepped in pretty early, even though Maidana may have one hand free and was trying to continue to work out of that clinch. But Tony Weeks would break it up pretty early, and I think that took away a little bit of Maidana's advantages. Do you agree with that, Mike, or how'd you see officiating?
I was sitting here nodding my head to a lot of the stuff you were saying. I think it was called the same across the board, which was not calling much of anything at all. So if you're going to do it like that, like Factoid said, I mean, if you're going to nitpick both of them equally. If you're not going to call anything, you're going to let it get rough in there and let some stuff go, then, hey, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I think the fight fans benefited, though, because I agree with Factoid. It was getting a little grimy in there. And I think if he would have, you know, been real picky, then we would have saw a lot more of Tony Weeks than what we have wanted to, and it probably would have messed up some of the ebbs and flows of the match. And because he was kind of hands off with it, although it, you know, started getting kind of rough in there, it allowed constant action. You know what I mean? It wasn't constantly him stepping in with his flat top, you know, pushing them apart. It was more action, hand to hand, and back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, you know, full point disclosure, Factoid, I agree with you. When I scored the fight, you know, live round by round, I ended up having it as a draw. But even though I had it a draw, I was pretty confident that when the decision came down, that it would be Mayweather that's winning. And that's before they even announced the scores. And that's not to suggest any controversy or I thought it was rigged, but I just figured Mayweather at home in Vegas. He came on strongly in the late rounds like we talked about, but I figured the judges were not going to – they weren't going to give Maidana a shutout or, you know, score the first 6 rounds 5-1 or maybe even 4-2 for Maidana. So I was confident that Mayweather was going to win, but this is the first time in a long time that we've really saw, you know, when that judgment came down, when they're reading the verdict, that people didn't know which way it was going to go. The people who were at my house, we didn't know. We were talking about it. I said, I think Mayweather wins it. Some people said, no, Maidana took it. And that's something that we're not used to seeing from a Floyd Mayweather fight, because he usually, after the first 2 or 3 rounds, he figures a guy out, and it's, you know, it's almost a shutout from that point. So it was great to see Mayweather to be in a close, competitive fight. There's some talk about rematch. We know Mayweather has already talked about going, you know, to the UK. We would guess that would say Amir Khan. That was before the fight. What do you guys think happens next? Factoid, do you think there will be a rematch against Maidana, or do you think Floyd will look in a different direction?
You know, for Mayweather, I just can't. Although Maidana really, it seems like he not only had, of course, the Argentinian crowd behind him, but he had a large majority of the Latin American and Latin community behind him. I could see there certainly continuing to be a push for him in the social media, the Twitters, the Facebooks, things like that, the message boards. And I think he's certainly deserving. And I love what he said after the fight. He was like, yeah, I'll give him a rematch. You know, I feel like I won the fight, you know. So while I think there'll be a buzz for it, I don't necessarily see Mayweather, you know, fighting him again. I think Floyd, you know, will take that win and he'll keep moving. You know, maybe as a younger man, you know, Jose Luis Castillo, you gave him that rematch. You know, you don't really see Floyd in a ton of rematches now. Although the market is thinning out, there's not a whole lot of guys left. And I think what he only has, 3 fights now? He's fought half the deal, the Showtime deal. So not a whole lot left to really challenge him. Danny Garcia is a guy we know out there. I think the Amir Khan fight is a real possibility now. I thought Khan looked very good. I thought it was a strong performance from Amir Khan, and really, I'm hoping we talk about it in a minute. I think one of the best performances from him. So, I mean, Khan was complaining and wanted to fight. I could see that happening. But Maidana getting the rematch, I don't know, man. I just think Floyd would probably avoid it. You got past that test, keep moving.
All right, interesting. We'll definitely come back to the Khan situation here shortly. Mike, I want to talk to you about the pre-fight controversies. There was a lot of stuff that was going on pre-fight, and some people seem to think, well, maybe that's the reason that Mayweather wasn't on his, quote-unquote A game. Number one, we had the issue with, the girlfriend, which I won't even go into the details, but, his ex-girlfriend. There was some beef between Floyd and her releasing some documents. There was some beef between Floyd and Nelly, right here from St. Louis, kind of over the girl. There was also this glove controversy where Maidana was not allowed to use his original gloves. There were some custom Everlast MX gloves. Floyd said there wasn't enough padding. The commission sided on him. Mayweather really didn't want, he wanted to force Maidana to wear the Grant gloves, which are known to be soft and a little bit fluffier. Ultimately, he wore Everlast gloves, just not the custom ones. But there was a lot of pre-fight activity, things to take his attention away from the fight. Mike, do you think that was publicity, Mayweather trying to drum up support for the fight, or do you think that these things could have taken his focus away from the bout?
No, I don't. No, I mean, listen. Either we went through this last time with Bernard Hopkins. The dude is older. I mean, even in other sports, when the Patriots were on top, and San Antonio was on top, and the Bulls were on top, Miami Heat. You're not gonna dominate everybody every single time. So I just hate that every time a superstar performer, LeBron James has a bad game, or I mean, even saw it with Kevin Durant, Mr. Unreliable, because he was struggling with the Grizzlies. I mean, the dude was in there with a guy that came with a game plan, stuck to it, and was competitive. I think that's all it is. I think he found himself in a scrap. I think he's been dominant for so long that he finally is in a rough fight or a competitive fight or halfway even fight, and people are looking for, well, hey, was it the gloves? Was it Miss Jackson? I just think the guy had a good game plan, worked on it in camp, and was able to be somewhat successful in implementing. I just think Mayweather found himself in a competitive fight.
Let me say this real fast too. I mean, those are two really strong points. Could those outside influences have impacted the fight? What about, the fact that Mayweather got cut? He got butted and he got cut in the fight. And for the first time, you see this guy bleeding. He doesn't, he's seen the blood from his nose maybe, I think, in the Cotto fight, but actually bleeding from his eye. That's something that Floyd hadn't dealt with. So that's, working through something in the ring. And he was able to do that. And his cut man did a hell of a job, man. They stopped it. You didn't see anything after those first couple of rounds. But that's something I think he fought through, and we hadn't seen from Mayweather either.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think that was a very integral part of that fight, an important moment when his cut man was able to get that cut together, because it was visibly bothering Mayweather. You could tell he was pawing at it. The blood was in his eye. He said he couldn't see, and he seemed out of sorts. You rarely see Mayweather see him out of sorts, and he just looked flustered at that moment. And that's when I thought, hey, Maidana may have a chance here, but the cut man was able to get that cut together after a round or so, and it was amazing. It was almost like it never happened. Once you got past the fifth round, you completely forgot about the cut. I think if Mayweather would have continued to bleed, I don't know if Maidana should have, you see that blood, you go for it, try to open it up a little bit more. But I think that may have impacted the fight even more, because Mayweather was definitely having trouble with that. But like you said, he showed he's a true warrior. He's got heart. He was able to fight through it and kind of take over the second half of that fight, which ended up leading to the victory. Anything else on this fight? Of course, this is the main event. This is the one that people want to talk about. So anything else that you guys see before we go to the undercard bouts? I'll take that as a no. I guess
I don't have anything. Like I said, I thought it was a competitive fight. I found it interesting, you know, afterwards, people talking about things that could have been distractions or whatnot. But yeah, I just thought he found himself in a competitive fight. I thought Maidana gave himself a good showing for himself and probably guaranteed himself some good purses in the future. Probably picked up a lot of fans that he didn't have before as well.
Oh yeah, and you saw people. I mean, they were chanting with him. They were, taking him to the back. They're screaming out El Chino and different chants. The crowd was definitely on his side. So yeah, he definitely picked up a lot of fans. One thing, either one of you can answer this. One more thing about this fight that I want to know. We talked about Mayweather going to the ropes, laying on the back of the ropes a lot. Why did he do that? We normally see Mayweather, work the center of the ring. He'll go back onto the ropes and fight off the ropes, but he seemed like he did it a lot more in this fight. Is it because of his age, he's getting older, or do you buy that he wanted to make the fight more exciting for the fans, so he decided just to stand and trade and show that he could win a tougher, more grittier fight?
It's a good question, Ish, man. I'm almost inclined to think it's a little bit of both. I mean, because you can see in moments when he's gotten back to the ropes, when he's allowed himself to kind of end up in that position where he looks very comfortable. He's still always extremely calm, and he looks like he wants his man to come in, let a couple punches go so he can find ways to kind of pick him apart on the inside, shoot the little quick uppercuts and little short shots. So sometimes I feel like he's comfortable, there, and he lures a guy in, with that kind of the rope-a-dope old school mentality. But other times in this fight, I think Maidana's will was a big part of that, and the fact that Marcos also, used his jab, I think, pretty well. I mean, there were some points in the fight where you saw him triple the jab. It's like, wow, Marcos Maidana tripled the jab up, was going to the body with the jab. And like Paulie was saying in the fight, he was first in a lot of exchanges, especially in the early part of the fight. And he was forcing Mayweather then by being first and then countering with those big shots, easily pushing him back and using, 15, 20 pounds weight advantage the night of the fight. You can never, understate that, man. That makes a big difference. While Floyd is faster than these guys, hey, if they can push him back and control him, that weight makes a big difference.
All right, absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about the undercard a little bit. First, the Amir Khan, Luis Collazo fight. Khan ended up winning this one, very clearly, very easily. Mike, you thought that one would be a close fight. I kind of figured that Amir Khan's speed would give Collazo a lot of problems. I guess his holding, he kind of employed the Klitschko strategy a little bit. I mean, he threw a lot of combinations, but he tied him up every time on the inside, and that visibly bothered Collazo. But Mike, why do you think Collazo had such trouble adapting to Amir Khan's style? Why couldn't he get off?
Well, I guess it's turning out to be maybe a situation that we talked about with Mayweather. I think we both said that we thought that Mayweather was good at fighting aggressive guys that come forward and try to take his head off, and Mayweather ended up being in a more difficult fight than I thought. The same thing can be said for Khan for me a little bit. I thought Khan would have a problem with the hand speed and counter punching of Collazo, but I mean, it just didn't seem to be the case. I mean, he had an answer for pretty much everything Collazo was trying to do, and I thought he looked very good. I thought it was maybe the best we've seen him look since Zab Judah, and I think this win might have meant a little bit more because Collazo right now was kind of on a hot streak and is a little better position than Zab Judah was when he beat him. He also looked good against Malignaggi, so maybe it's a way of Khan showing that he can handle these boxers, and maybe his Achilles is the aggressive fighters. But I don't know. I just totally bombed on that one. I thought that fight would be competitive and maybe closer to the way the main event was, maybe more of a 50-50 fight. There were stretches in weeks leading up to the fight where I actually was thinking about picking Collazo. I just hadn't been impressed with Khan. I thought Luis had a nice style for him, especially that he was a southpaw. And Khan just shattered all those myths. I just take my hat off to him. I thought he looked good. I thought he might have pushed his name to the forefront of the Mayweather sweepstakes, especially if he doesn't give Maidana an immediate rematch.
In fact, why do you think that Khan looks so impressive? I mean, he looked spectacular in that fight. The things that he was able to do, the way he was able to control it. It wasn't always pretty. He did a lot of holding. Like I said, that kind of threw Collazo, that frustrated him
He did a lot of hitting too, though.
Huh?
He did a lot of hitting too, though.
Yes, he did.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I think, what
are your thoughts?
I think for the most part, coming in, I also thought, Collazo had a real good chance to, upset the apple cart a little bit. I was kind of rolling on the Louis train. I can't lie. And again, I like to be here on the spot so I can tell it like it is. I thought Collazo was going to win the fight. I thought maybe he would, do Amir Khan in. I think Mike, really made a lot of good points. I think it was probably the best performance I've seen from Amir Khan in many years now. I would almost have to, give a lot of credit to his trainer. I mean, this looked like a different fighter in terms of his patience, not being overly aggressive, not jumping in and being out of control and allowing himself to then be caught by, a good counterpuncher. And Louis Collazo was certainly that, a guy who's slick enough to be able to counter. So I think the patience, and hopefully that's something that, Virgil Hunter really kind of instilled in him. I think it came to the forefront. Anytime, though, you've got a guy who has the hand speed of Amir Khan, he's going to be able to mix it up. If he can get in and hold like you talked about, you hold a little bit, you get out, pop, you hit the guy, and you're back in holding. That's going to frustrate anybody, if they can't find a way to get their own shots off, and as soon as they're ready, you're smothering them with the hold. Khan was a master at it, and, he didn't allow himself to get bullied around by Collazo. I was really impressed, man. I really was. And I've been asking all my fight fans, like my fight buddies, what do you think, man? What about the Khan fight? A lot of them are saying the same thing. Yeah, it was a lot of holding, but in the end, one of the better performances we've seen from this guy. I think he's right in position now. You run the undercard. Now you've probably given yourself the best opportunity to get that Mayweather fight.
Yeah, and I think, there was a lot of holding, but like you guys said, he was throwing a lot of punches. Like, that's the difference between, Vladimir Klitschko, he'll throw 2 jabs and hold, or he'll throw a hook and hold. He doesn't throw too many punches. Khan, he threw a lot of punches when he was free. You could tell that he was a little bit nervous for the inside game, and so whenever he would get inside, he would hold. Although the Showtime announcers, they talked about him not being a very good inside fighter, and I kind of said, oh yeah, they're right. He's holding every time. And right when I said that, he got a knockdown, I think or at least started with a body shot from the inside. But how many times did he put Collazo down? Was it 2 or 3?
So I remember 2 times for certain. It may have been 3 though. I know 2.
Okay, yeah, put it
3
times, Mike.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it was 3.
Okay, yeah, and that's very impressive for Amir Khan. We know he has power, but we haven't seen him look dominant like that against a quality opponent in quite a while. One thing I will say, although he looked great in that fight, like I said, Collazo is not a guy who's really known for having a whole lot of power. That's why I thought that Khan would, kind of expose him a little bit and win easy. So I'm not buying that stock completely yet that Amir Khan is back, that Amir Khan's gonna, come out and shock the world or shock Mayweather, because he was in there with a guy who's not known for having power. That said, it was still an interesting fight, even though he was up heavily on the cards, because if Khan gets touched in the chin, he could still go. He never did, but that at least made the fight still interesting, even though it was a pretty one-sided affair.
Yeah, but you know what, though, to counter that ish, though, I'm starting to wonder. You said if he gets clipped on the chin that he might go, and that's been my thinking with him as well. I think anybody who watches the fight game has got to be there thinking as many times he's been on the deck lately. But I'm wondering if maybe it might be an issue where the extra 7 pounds might actually help him out and make him a little bit sturdier. You really have all kind of research done on how the massive drying out and massive weight loss leading up to these weigh-ins kind of weakens the guy. And I think they're giving something like 22 hours or so before the fight to kind of rehydrate and put on a little bit more mass. I really was impressed with how filled out Khan looked. He didn't look like he was a guy who had been fighting at 140 for the last 5 years and started at 135. I thought he looked full. I thought he looked strong. I think that might have helped him take some of Collazo's shots, and I think it might have added a little bit more thud to his power. That's quite impressive to come up from 140 and fight a guy that's a former title holder and put him on the deck. We can't remember whether it's 2 or 3 times. Put him on the deck 2 or 3 times in your first fight in weight class. So we might see an added improved Khan just by the fact that he moved up the division. So I think the 3rd fight under Virgil Hunter, I was worried that Virgil Hunter was going to make him boring, kind of like Andre Ward, but that didn't seem to be the case. I agree that it was a lot of holding, but I also saw a whole lot of landing upside Collazo's head. So maybe it was just a tactic that was used for that fight, knowing that maybe Collazo was going to be a little bit more effective in the trenches.
All right, so now let's go to the other undercard matchup, at least the other one that people care about.
Do we have to, man?
We got to, man. We got to. The people are interested in Adrien Broner, and I think I said on my Twitter earlier today, Adrien Broner is like, and this is a spoiler alert for anybody with, or not necessarily, but Adrien Broner is kind of like King Joffrey on Game of Thrones. Almost everybody hates him. Like, everybody only watches his fights to see him get his head knocked off. Didn't happen this fight. He won. Well, let's talk about the fight first. We'll talk about the other stuff later. Factoid, how do you think, were you impressed with Adrien Broner as he actually moved down from 147 to 140? I think that was his first fight there since he skipped over those divisions. But how did he look in his 140-pound debut?
At the end of the fight, his face was clean. I mean, he marked up his opponent's face a little bit. I mean, Broner won the fight. It was a snooze fest for me, man. It was a boring fight. I just didn't get much out of it. You know, I think in the end, it's a good win for him coming back off the devastating loss. He moved to 140. You know, I just don't see the power, though. I'm just going to be, frank about it. I just don't see the power from Adrien Broner. He didn't clearly display it at 47 when he jumped to 2 weight classes. I didn't see it, Saturday night at 140. You're going back to Antonio DeMarco and Jason Litzau and guys you knocked out at 35 and all this. I don't see that he's carrying that type of power. I don't see that he's gotten any better. He's still standing flat-footed in the pocket. He's there to be hit, and if you had a guy maybe who had a little bit more boxing ability, a little bit younger, whatever the case may be, I think Broner would have been in trouble against a real top-tier guy at 40. Petersons and, of that nature, some strong guys. Danny Garcia, of course, the champion. It just didn't do anything for me. And then the annex post-fight, he's going to run his mouth, and people dislike him. But I don't know. I was looking for more from Broner, and I didn't get it. And again, I think maybe that's all about the power. Just wasn't able to close the show and really hurt the guy bad.
Yeah, and I think that's evident because I noticed that as well. It's like, okay, I thought him going down on 140, maybe this is a more natural fit because that power definitely wasn't there at 147. But you're right. It didn't look like he had power at 140 either. We know he's a guy that has speed. We know he's a guy that has skill. But like you said, I was bored in that fight. I really wasn't impressed. He had an opponent, I think, that was expected to be kind of a showcase for him. He was expected to win this fight. His opponent didn't really have the power to, we're talking about Molina. He didn't really have the power to pressure him and to put him in trouble like Marcos Maidana did in that last fight. But yeah, Broner, he looked pretty regular, as one of my coworkers like to say. And without him having power, I think that's going to be a problem for him because people now know, okay, we need to apply pressure to him. So I think once they start matching him with guys who can put that constant pressure, who can push him back, I think he's really going to struggle. So I don't know, if he can get back to 135, if he can make that weight anymore. But he's going to either have to try to find some power, develop some power, or he's going to have to adjust his fight game a little bit. Mike, Factoid already opened it up, the can of worms about after the fight, his comments, his interviews. What do you got to say, man?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know, man. The guy's hard to root for, man. It just is what it is. I mean, he is, a guy you're gonna tune in for. First off, I didn't think he looked that bad in the fight, and I think he'll be. This is just my opinion, not to get any controversy, no back and forth between us. But I thought he looked fine. I think 140 is a good weight for him. I don't know how many knockouts he's going to get at that weight, but that tends to be. I won't say it's always the case, but with a lot of guys, the knockouts seem to tally off a little bit when they go up in competition. That obviously wasn't the case on Saturday, him going up in competition, but I don't know if he would be stretching guys at 35 either, once he started fighting more elite competition, because under a critical analysis of his resume, he doesn't actually have a who's who in boxing, so I don't know if maybe his power was a little bit overrated because of the way he was getting guys out of there. So I don't know if he's ever been as devastating of a puncher as we thought, and it definitely might not continue if he continues to go up in competition. That being said, I think he'll be okay at 140. I think he's still going to continue to beat some good guys. I think he's going to continue to lose to some guys. But his antics have got to stop, man. It's not funny, man. It's not funny. I don't know who's getting a kick out of it. I don't know. He's advised by Al Heyman. He's under Richard Schaefer. I saw Kevin Cunningham in his corner. His coach seems like he has some common sense. So I don't really know who's going to take this guy to the side and say, man, tone it down a little bit, little brother. I mean, it's just unnecessary. It's Mexican Independence Day. He's using vulgarity, talking about beating up a Mexican and, stuff like that, and saying some other off-the-wall stuff where he was talking football and thinking about football during the fight. I just was hoping for more after the Maidana fight. He seemed as though he was humbled a little bit, and it seems like that medicine that he got back in December is just totally wore off, and he's back to being Broner.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we saw some more humping. We saw him actually slam his opponent during the fight. But yeah, after the fight, you talked about the NFL stuff, and I don't know about where you guys were watching the fight.
I mean, I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, everybody who was at my house was looking around like, what? And that's always been my issue with Broner, is like, he tries to be funny, he tries to crack jokes, but he's not funny at all. Like, get a comedy writer or something. If you want to do that, get a writer, get somebody else, because you're just not a funny individual. And so, I don't know.
He tries hard, man. Bad joke after bad joke, though. The pre-fight, like the press conference, he got up there trying to be all dry and like, I'm the same Adrien Broner, I'm still gonna do. Like, nobody cares about that, man. Like, you're a bad knockoff of Floyd, like Pretty Boy Floyd. It's a bad imitation, man.
Terrible, absolutely terrible. And I would probably give him leeway if he's funny. Like I said, I don't mind people who talk trash. We see Keith Thurman. He talks a lot of trash. He kind of does it. He has a little Ice-T kind of vibe, kind of stupid with it. But I like
baby hair hanging off the
ponytail shot.
Right.
The little pretty boy with the lift. The talk a little bit.
Exactly. I don't mind guys who talk trash, but Broner's just ignorant with it, and he's just not funny at all. So, like you said, I hope somebody pulls him aside. I don't think it's going to happen, and that may be part of his thing. He may say, as long as people care about me one way or another, that's going to get him money. People are going to tune in to watch him fight. So maybe that's his thing. Maybe he's smarter than us, and he just does it to make people hate him so he can be that heel. But, I mean, geez, just do better at it, man. If you're going to do it, just at least make me laugh. James Toney. Mike, we watched a lot of James Toney, man, back in the day.
Yeah.
James Toney said some vulgar stuff. He used a lot of profanity. But James Toney was funny with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could laugh, and we would talk about it. We'd email about it. Man, you see what James Toney said?
But
nobody does that with Broner.
Same thing. But Hopkins, he didn't always give his interviews by the book. And, he say especially some stuff that will pop up on the internet. But the stuff will legitimately make you laugh out loud. Broner just has no direction, man. Wow. I think he's, of the belief that being as ignorant as possible is somewhat entertaining and what people want to see. It's not, man. I mean, people really can't stand the dude, man, and it's all legit.
The truth. It's the truth.
All right. So, anything else from the moment? I don't really care about the Jay Leon Love fight. If you guys want to talk about that, go for it. But anything else that you want to discuss regarding this card, or what happened in the past, or what's going to happen in the future?
Paulie Malignaggi had a lot. I'm a big fan of Paulie. It looked like Paulie had a lot of makeup on in the post-fight section there. Again, that beat down a couple weeks ago from Malignaggi. Still, you can see some of that in the makeup, man. I need Showtime Sports to do a better job.
Hey, and you mentioned Malignaggi. You know what was funny that I noticed a little bit? whenever Sean Porter and Keith Thurman came on to talk and do that little segment, Malignaggi was gone. Malignaggi's like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom. I'll see y'all in 15 minutes. He didn't want to see Sean Porter at all. But hey, Malignaggi, give him a shout out to him, man. He's an excellent commentator. I love, seeing him give his perspective on the fight. I think he does a great job. So if he retires, man, I'm happy to see him there on Showtime doing the fights.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We need to retire because another beating like that one in the last couple weeks when we learn his words and he ain't gonna have a job doing that either. So yeah, I think probably he's found his niche. I think he needs to stick to that and leave the fight game alone, turn it over to these young guys, and keep doing what he does.
Magic man.
All right. Well, that's all the time we got for today. Don't want to draw it out too much. But again, Factoid, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to find you on social media, where should they go?
Hit me up on Twitter at Mr. Factoid. We can chop it up, talk about these Rams or something local, St. Louis, national, international, doesn't matter, man. I'm just a junkie, sports junkie.
I'm sure you're all over the NBA, stuff. The NBA playoffs had a lot of Game 7s, man. So I've been peeking at your timeline. I see you do talk about all across the board. Factoid talks about everything. Don't just look at them for boxing. Any type of sports. Mike. People want to see you. They got to go to the local pub, the local Hooters store or something like that. They down on the street corner.
Old school, baby.
He's sticking to that for life. But thanks for tuning in once again. We'll definitely be back at you next week, next Monday, with our next edition of In the Clench. I was about to say In the Clutch, which is my column. But appreciate it. Keep tuning in to stlamerican.com or here on YouTube to find out all the latest in boxing and sports news. Appreciate it. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Yeah.